November 1942. Deep inside a concrete bunker in East Prussia, a man is staring at a map. His fingers are stained with pencil lead and obsession. The world thinks wars are won by bullets. They aren't. They are won and lost in the gray matter between the ears. At this exact moment, 250,000 men of the Sixth Army are being surrounded. They are starving. They are freezing. They are waiting for one word: retreat. But that word never comes. Instead, the order is east and fast, not a step back. Why? Why would a military genius sacrifice his finest army for a pile of rubble? This wasn't a strategic decision. It was a psychological malfunction. Welcome to Psyche of Power. Today, we analyze the Stalingrad disaster through the lens of the Sunk Cost Fallacy. We've all been there, staying in a bad relationship because you've put in 5 years, finishing a terrible movie because you paid for the ticket. But when a dictator falls for this trap, the currency isn't dollars or time, it's human souls. Let's dissect the anatomy of a self-inflicted apocalypse. To understand Stalingrad, we first need to understand a bizarre experiment by Yale economist Martin Shubik called the dollar auction. Imagine I auction off a $1 bill. There's one catch. The second highest bidder must also pay their bid, but they get nothing. At first, it's a game, but as the bid hits 95 cents, something terrifying happens. Logic dictates you stop, but to avoid losing the 0 for nothing, you bid a 10. People have been known to pay 20 for a single dollar in this experiment. By the winter of 1942, Hitler was the second highest bidder in the ultimate dollar auction. He had invested so much blood and prestige into taking Stalin's city that the cost of walking away felt higher than the cost of total destruction. Strategic logic said withdraw, save the army, fight another day. But the sunk cost fallacy whispered, if you leave now, the 100,000 men who died taking these streets died for nothing. The loss was already incurred, but Hitler, like a desperate gambler at 4 a.m., believed the next roll of the dice would pay back his debt. This is the Entrapment Effect. The more you suffer for a goal, the more valuable that goal becomes, regardless of its actual worth. For Hitler, Stalingrad was no longer a city. It was a shrine to his own ego, and shrines require sacrifices. The vastness of Russia was the casino floor, and Hitler was out of chips. Hardcore history tells us he was a madman. Psychology tells us he was behaving exactly like a human being under extreme stress. In biology, this is called the Concord fallacy. It's the evolutionary error of continuing an investment based on past costs, rather than future utility. Animals do it, humans do it. But Hitler turned it into a state religion. Every step forward increased the investment. Every death made retreat feel like a betrayal of the dead. This is the paradox to save the Sixth Army. He had to admit they had suffered for nothing. And for a narcissist, nothing is a fate worse than death. This brings us to our first cognitive reversal. It wasn't that Hitler couldn't see the danger. It's that he refused to see it because his brain was literally protecting his identity. 3 minutes in. Let's talk about Leon Festinger's study, When Prophecy Fails. In 1954, Festinger infiltrated a cult that believed the world would end on December 20, onest. When the world didn't end, did they admit they were wrong? No. They became more radical. They claimed their faith had saved the world. Hitler was the leader of a national cult. He had prophesied the 1,000-year Reich. When the encirclement, Operation Uranus, closed the trap, Hitler faced a choice. Logic, the prophecy is wrong. I am not invincible. Dissonance, the prophecy is right. The generals are just failing me. Hitler chose the latter. To admit a mistake at Stalingrad was to admit the entire Nazi ideology was a lie. Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort of holding two conflicting beliefs. To resolve the pain, he had to change one of those beliefs. He couldn't change his ego, so he changed the reality of the Sixth Army. He began commanding units that no longer existed. He was living in a psychological simulation. Enter the enablers. Göring promised the Luftwaffe could fly in 500 tons of supplies a day. They could barely manage 30, but Hitler needed to believe Göring, because if Göring was right, Hitler didn't have to admit he was wrong. Philosophy tells us we seek the truth. History tells us we seek comfort. Paulus was a man of rules. He waited for orders. He was the perfect victim for a narcissist's trap. Hitler was thousands of miles away, safe in a forest. It's easy to be hard when you aren't the one eating shoe leather. This is the identifiable victim effect. We care about one person, but we are indifferent to thousands. To Hitler, the Sixth Army wasn't 250,000 fathers and sons. They were just statistics on the ledger of his sunk cost. The Soviets understood this. They weren't just fighting a war. They were participating in a psychological harvest. Every 7 seconds, a German soldier dies in Russia. This was the sound of the sunk cost coming due. Reversal, we often think Hitler was cold. He wasn't. He was a volcano of suppressed panic. Every no to a retreat was a desperate attempt to stop the sun from setting on his sanity. He built a psychological fortress, and the Sixth Army was the mortar between the bricks. The river was a mirror, and Hitler hated what he saw in it. Now, let's look at the final, most terrifying stage of this fallacy. 6 minutes in, Freud spoke of Thanatos, the death drive, the innate human urge toward destruction and return to the inorganic. When Hitler realized he couldn't win, the sunk cost fallacy evolved into something even darker, nihilism. If the Sixth Army couldn't win, he decided they deserved to die. This is the ultimate double or nothing. If I can't have my dollar back, I'll burn the entire casino. General Manstein launched Operation Winter Storm to rescue them. He got within 30 miles. He signaled Paulus break out, come to us. Hitler forbade it. He claimed they weren't strong enough, but the truth, if they broke out, they were admitting the siege was a failure. He preferred them dead as heroes rather than alive as evidence of his mistake. In his final move of psychological manipulation, Hitler promoted Paulus to field marshal. It was a suicide invitation. Here is a promotion. Now, kill yourself so I can use your death for propaganda. But Paulus did something Hitler didn't expect. He chose to live. He broke the spell. On February 20, 1943, the Sixth Army ceased to exist. The sunk cost was paid in full. 150,000 dead in the pocket, 90,000 captured, a whole army erased from the map. Did Hitler learn? No. The fallacy only deepened. He applied the Stalingrad logic to every front until the end. Stalingrad was the blueprint for the destruction of Germany. It was the moment the power in the psyche became purely suicidal. You might think you're different, but you're not. Every time you say, "I've already spent so much on this," you are Hitler in the bunker. You are sacrificing your future self to appease the ghosts of your past mistakes. The hardest thing for a human to do is to say, "I was wrong, and the last 3 years were a waste." But until you can say that, you are not the master of your life. You are a slave to your sunk costs. Hardcore history isn't about dates. It's about the terrifying consistency of human error. Stalingrad is a monument to what happens when we let our ego write checks that our reality can't cash. There is a thin line between perseverance and delusion. That line is usually drawn in blood. Don't die in your own Stalingrad. Know when to walk away. Because the only thing worse than a mistake is a mistake you refuse to end. This is Psyche of Power. Subscribe if you're brave enough to face the truth. See you in the next one.